Welcome, everyone, to the first of many Concussion Discussion Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Sherlock. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been wanting to do this podcast for a while. As many of you know, I do write some MMA articles here and there. I know a lot of people do enjoy the work, so I actually wanted to get behind a mic and give you more of an unfiltered view on the state of MMA and combat sports, to where I can't hit a backspace button. I've already told the producer, please do not edit this too much because this is the whole point. I don't have a bias. I'm not tied to many MMA outlets. I don't have any MMA bosses, MMA combat sports related figures, so I can say whatever the fuck I want. That's the point of the podcast. So before I jump into this thing, I want to tell you guys what this podcast is all about. So I'm going to cover what's in the headlines in combat sports, MMA and boxing. Mostly MMA, but some boxing, especially this week, because there's a lot to talk about in the boxing world. I'm going to give fight predictions. Unfortunately, no fight predictions this week. As you know, there's not a whole lot of fights going on. Cannot wait for UFC 223, April 7th, which is my birthday weekend. So super looking forward to that. Couldn't ask for a better birthday present. Going to have some guests on the show. Some UFC fighters, some Bellator fighters already lined up. Really excited about that. And then I'm going to answer some questions, because that's the point of the name of the podcast, the Concussion Discussion. I want this to be a discussion. I want you guys to email me, and I'll plug that email at the end of the podcast. Email me your questions, your opinions, and tell me why I'm wrong. I want that. I like debate, as many of you know. I love debate, but you better come correct, because I'm always right. So good luck with that. So I guess we're going to get into some current events on what's going on in the world of combat sports. So the first thing I want to talk about, because I just want to kill this before this podcast really even gets going, this whole Floyd Mayweather talking about his wrestling is a 7, his kicks are a 4, because he's talking about getting an MMA, and how Tyron Woodley is going to be coaching him, and how he may come to MMA in 2018. Listen, if you buy into this, any of this bullshit from Floyd Mayweather, stop doing that. This is not happening. Floyd is a very smart man. He knows how to stay in the headlines. It's what he's good at. That's part of the reason, aside from him being one of the greatest boxers of all time, arguably the best, he knows how to keep the media around him. That's what he's doing right now. He knows that if he steps in the octagon, he's going to get destroyed. And a lot of people are saying, look, he's naive. He doesn't understand what his skills are or are not. He knows that his wrestling is not a 7 and that his kicks are not a 4. Obviously, his boxing is insane. But look, that's not going to happen. If he came to the UFC for a super fight, and I can't even believe I'm entertaining this, but for the fucking sake of the podcast and for the listeners, if he came to the UFC, he would get his legs kicked out from under him, he would get taken down, and he would get choked out, or his face smashed by elbows, and it would end inside 2 minutes. And 2 minutes is being extremely generous. If Floyd Mayweather lasted 2 minutes in the octagon, that man won the fucking lottery. Okay? So let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. Second on the agenda, which I think this is great, Francis Ngannou is talking about he wants that super fight against Brock Lesnar. Hey, Francis, are you out of your fucking mind? Dude, you just got out-wrestled by Stipe. And no shame, dude, Stipe is a hell of a wrestler. But if Brock Lesnar takes you down, you ain't going anywhere. Stipe weighs 240 pounds. You weigh about 270, 275. And Stipe dominated you, laid on top of you, and smashed your face for the better part of 5 rounds. If Brock Lesnar does that, anywhere from, 280, 285 come fight night, goodbye to your career. I get it. It's a money fight. You want that. But you have a career in front of you. Let's stop that nonsense. So, again, all right, this is a good one. This is one that worries me. Frankie Edgar versus Cub Swanson at UFC Atlantic City. Now, I'm actually going to spend some time on this. One, because I'm going to be there. I actually bought my tickets before knowing that Frankie and Cub were going to be on that fight card. But I'm very excited that I got my tickets before that. So, super stoked about that fight. To be there and watch one of my favorite fighters of all time go out there and fight in front of me. This fight worries me. This fight worries me for Frankie. Now, Frankie fought Cub before, dominated him the whole fight, and ended up winning by submission in the 5th round. Dominated Cub. Completely dominated Cub. And Cub's a monster. He is, he's never been a champion, but he's always hung out in that top 5, top 10 in the featherweight division. What worries me about this fight is Frankie Edgar just got knocked out by Brian Ortega in the 1st round. Now, Frankie Edgar has never been finished in his life, never been knocked out, never been submitted. Former 155-pound champion, and he's been in the top 3 basically his whole time at featherweight. So what bothers me about this fight is he just got knocked out 7 weeks ago against Brian Ortega. And Brian Ortega had a great performance. I'm not taking anything away from him. And I'm not saying that Frankie Edgar, like many are saying that, this is the end of his run. He's 36 years old. He's taken a lot of damage, which he has. If you watch some of those Gray Maynard fights, he took a lot of damage in those fights. But I'm not saying that he's getting chinny and this is the end of his run. But what I don't want to see is another Michael Bisping situation. Michael Bisping got choked unconscious by George St. Pierre, UFC 217, to lose his middleweight strap. 3 weeks, turns around and fights Kelvin Gastelum in China. Kelvin Gastelum, who really is a true 170-pounder, fighting at 185 right now. Kelvin hits him with that straight right that many have, fallen victim to. And, if you haven't seen that knockout, it's brutal. And I'm a Michael Bisping fanboy, man. And that was hard to watch. I don't want to see that happen to Frankie. I had more concern for Bisping because Bisping has taken some damage, and Bisping is a bit older. But that was really an eye-opener for myself and a lot of other MMA fans out there that, you know what, your time will come, and especially after getting knocked out in the fashion that both those men did, you need to take a break. Right now, I still probably have Frankie winning that fight just because of his skill, but I'm still worried about the guy. I worry about these fighters' health. I worry about their brains, because getting your brain knocked around that much for so long is no good for anyone. So excited for that fight. I'm glad that I got tickets before they got outrageous, but a little bit worried about that guy. Darren Till versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, UFC Fight Night 130 in Liverpool. Holy shit, I am excited for this fight. I'm excited because stylistically, this is a great fight. You've got Darren Till, who just comes forward, very technical striking, against Wonderboy Thompson, who has that really awkward karate style. He blitzes in, gets out, comes in, gets out, and, then a kick comes to the head, and you're on your butt, and you don't know what happened. Excited for this fight for Darren Till. Not excited for this fight for Wonderboy Thompson. This is a lose-lose for Wonderboy Thompson. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is ranked number 1 in the world right now, right underneath the champion, Tyron Woodley. Now, Woodley and Thompson have fought twice. First one at UFC 205, Madison Square Garden. You might remember that, one of the biggest cards of all time. and it was a draw. And I thought it was a fair draw. I thought that was a fair decision. So they fight, draw, they do the rematch. One of the most boring fights of all time. And Woodley ends up winning that decision. And, Thompson, he beats Masvidal. He's looked good since. This is a lose-lose for him. Dana White himself said this was a terrible, boring fight. Let's say Wonder Boy wins this fight. You really think they're going to do Wonder Boy versus Woodley 3 after that snooze fest? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Because in the world of the WME, IMG, the folks that just bought the UFC, it's an entertainment company. They want entertaining fights. That was not an entertaining fight. This is not the world of the UFC that it used to be, where the number one guy fights the champion. That's not how it is anymore. It's about entertainment. Let's say Wonder Boy loses that fight. Then he loses against the number 7 guy. Till basically gets a title shot. I'll get into why he might not on this next, current event. But, if he wins and he's got a shot at it, he's in line for the title. He's 16-0-1, that one being a draw, that one draw being in the UFC, 4 wins in the UFC. He's looked good. I think everyone's kind of jumping on the hype train a little bit too soon. He beat Cowboy Cerrone in the first round in Poland. And look, I love Cowboy just as much as the next guy because he's a fighter's fighter. But the problem is that Cowboy definitely has some miles on him. So I love Till and I loved his performance against Cowboy. I'm not taking that performance and hopping on that hype train just yet. Am I a fan of Till? Of course. Am I following him like the next coming of Jesus? Definitely not. So, very interesting fight. I'm really looking forward to that one. And, we'll see. But good fight for Till. Not a great fight for Wonder Boy because I don't think he has anything to win. Now, the only thing that could throw a wrench in that whole situation, another debacle in this welterweight division, Colby Covington fighting Rafael dos Anjos, possibly at UFC 224 in Brazil for the interim welterweight title. This is a problem as far as a purist standpoint because Woodley's fought everybody. He hasn't fought in a while because of an injury. It's not because he doesn't want to fight. It's because of a legitimate injury. Look, today marks 500 days that Conor has not defended his lightweight title, and Woodley hasn't even gone a year without defending his because of injury. So, this is interesting. So, from a purist standpoint, I got it. It doesn't make sense. And that's what everyone's talking about, is they're angry, and Woodley's going to be angry because of this interim title. But listen, are you guys fucking blind? So, Colby Covington is a guy that just talks trash about Brazilians, has talked trash about the country, about the fighters. And then you have Rafael dos Anjos, a Brazilian, former champ at lightweight in Brazil. Won him for this fight because title fights make more money for the fighters. And I'm all about that for the fighters. These guys work their asses off. They deserve that money. Give them that money. That's number one. Number two, am I the only one that... Ray Charles can see this shit. This brash, douchebag American. I love him, but, he's coming off as a little pro wrestler-ish. Little Chael Sonnen. But I love it. You got this brash American talking shit about Brazil. Go ahead and put him in Brazil. Look, if he loses to Rafael dos Anjos, that country is going to go mad. If he wins, holy shit, that's a marketing pot of gold for that fight going to fight Woodley or Till or Wonder Boy Thompson, however that shit show works out. But that guy is look, no one knew who he was 2 years ago, and now he's all that anyone has to talk about. Look, the last card in London, it was a good card. I'm a Fight Pass subscriber, paying customer. UFC Fight Pass is kind of shit, let's be honest. Put on some better fights, UFC Fight Pass. But no one was talking about those great fights. Everyone was talking about Colby Covington tweeting and talking shit to Fabricio Verdum after being knocked out. That's what everyone's talking about. That fight makes perfect sense to me. Like I said, email me, tell me I'm wrong. Next event. UFC set to offer Anthony Joshua $500 million contract for Zuffa Boxing. Okay, I know Dana has talked about trying to get Zuffa Boxing up and running, trying to, get Zuffa in the game of boxing. And I get it. If you're going to start boxing, why not get one of the biggest stars right now, arguably the biggest star right now, to start your boxing promotion? But a few red flags go off here for me. So you're going to offer the guy $500 million. First, I don't know where that money's coming from, because last time I checked, someone's got a $4.2 billion nut to pay off. Now, if the Fertitta brothers are involved with that Zuffa thing, that's a completely different story. But even if that's the case, you offer this guy $500 million, and he says he's interested. Joshua has said he's interested. Who are you going to get to fight the guy? He fights Joseph Parker this weekend, and that's something I'll get into a little bit later. Deontay Wilder already won that fight. He wants Anthony Joshua. Joshua fights Joseph Parker this weekend. So that's really the only fight to make, assuming that Anthony Joshua wins this fight. The only fight to make. But who are you going to get him to fight? Because he's not fighting nobodies. I promise you that. Everybody knows that. He's not going to fight just some bums. So that means you're going to have to pay out another $500 million to another boxer of his caliber that the fans want to see. Can they afford it? I don't know. But you have to put together a roster. You can't have the old school UFC days where it was like Andrei Arlovsky fighting Tim Sylvia every 2 weeks because you didn't have anyone else in the heavyweight division. You can't rely on the Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture model that you used to. You can't have it. You have to have a roster of guys. This isn't 2001. You've got to build this, and you have to build it carefully. I would love to see this, but I don't know how they get it done. Personally, I don't think it'll get done, because I think Joshua probably gets it done in a decision, maybe a late KO against Parker, and then he fights Deontay Wilder in London, probably biggest fight pay-per-view wise of the year, assuming the state of Triple G and Canelo right now. But very interesting. Oh, speaking of, while I'm talking about Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker, have you guys seen the odds for this? Anthony Joshua right now is a minus 900 favorite, while Joseph Parker is a plus 550 underdog. Are you fucking kidding me? Look, I get that Anthony Joshua is a beast, but these odds are a little bit crazy. If you want to make some money, and like I said, Anthony Joshua is my pick, but if you want to make some money, I would definitely put some money on Joseph Parker this weekend. I know I probably will, while we're talking about boxing. So this is kind of old news, but like I said, I kind of want to give my take on this Canelo failing 2 drug test against the Triple G rematch. For those of you that didn't see the first fight, the fact that was a draw was fucking insane. I went in watching that fight as a fan, thinking that Canelo could get it done. So I watched through the lens of that, Canelo could get it done that night. Since rewatching it, I had to rewatch it once and saw that was definitely not Canelo's fight. Triple G won that fight 8 rounds to 4, maybe if you're being really nice, 7 rounds to 5. Now you have the rematch. Everyone's super pumped up for this May 5th rematch. Seems like, the next big thing in boxing. Well, I don't want to say next big thing, but really is the biggest superstar in boxing right now in Canelo to many. Fails a drug test and says, "Oh, it was bad beef." This has happened before, legitimately, with boxers in the past. But if you don't think boxing is dirty, you need to open your eyes. I think this fight still happens. Maybe it's not May 5th. But I think this fight still happens because boxing is I don't want to say, no, rig's the wrong word, but it's a jacked up sport. There's a lot of funny business going on. But, this Nevada State Athletic Commission wants to make their money. And this is a huge cash cow. Nevada State Athletic Commission is going to find a way for this fight to happen, just like I think, with the athletic commissions and USADA, I think John Jones is going to get off fairly easy as well because he is a cash cow. Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Kamaru Usman for the main event in UFC Chile. Good fight. Usman and Darren Till, who I spoke about earlier, were kind of going at it on Twitter. Usman called him scared. Till says, yeah, I'm real scared of you. I'm thinking reading this, get fucking real. The only problem with Usman right now is in his last fight against Emil Mek said that, this was 30%. He's kind of retracted that because it was taken as that he only gave 30% effort. He's retracted and said, no, his health was at 30%. Regardless, not a good look. I think if it was not for that, because Dana White, the boss, has kind of trashed him for saying that. If it wasn't for that, I think he, I believe that he was talking about the 30% health. I do believe that because I don't think any fighter in their right mind would say, I just gave the paying customers 30%. But I think that if he didn't say that, maybe he would have a case to fight a higher ranked guy. And I think this is going to be the last current event. This makes my dick soft. It really does. Demetrius Johnson and TJ Dillashaw not happening according to Dana White. Look, I was so looking forward to this happening at UFC 226. TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson, possibly the Cyborg Amanda Nunes fight, which is not happening, most likely. And then Stipe versus DC for the heavyweight title. I was so fucking pumped about this. Aside from the DC and Stipe fight, I thought that the TJ and Demetrius Johnson fight, that was what I've been so pumped about. Even Dana White said that he wanted that fight. TJ wanted that fight. Demetrius Johnson said he wanted that fight. Now it's not happening. I think this fight will happen on a few circumstances. One, Demetrius Johnson has to get healthy. He's rehabbing his shoulder right now. That's why it's not happening in July at UFC 226. The big X factor here is TJ is going to have to defend his bantamweight title. So he regained his title at UFC 217, knocking out Cody Garbrandt in the second round. He looked good. But the weird thing about that division right now there's really no clear contender. Cody not knocked out, but completely outclassed Dominic Cruz, who beat TJ Dillashaw in a split decision, fight that many people had TJ Dillashaw winning, but Dominic Cruz got that win, took TJ's belt. A few fights later, Cody comes in and just completely outclasses him. TJ Dillashaw comes in against Cody, knocks him out second round. Now you've got this MMA math shit doesn't work. Some people that try to make an argument for this guy beat this guy, but then this guy beat this, it doesn't work because it's a cycle. This is a cycle of unknowns. So we all have to get on the same page and say, look, this MMA math doesn't work. We have to stop using that as, a talking point. So really the only, two clear contenders right now. You've got some monsters there. You've got Marlon Moraes, who's looked phenomenal. Then you've got Jimmy Rivera, who I think will be a world champ someday, probably someday soon, to be honest. You've got Cody Garbrandt. In a perfect world, I'd love to see Cody Garbrandt versus Jimmy Rivera. Winner of that fights TJ. A lot of things in the mix in that division right now. Even TJ has said that he doesn't know what exactly is going on in that division. And he really doesn't have a, number one, clear challenger. So, really bummed that fight is not happening. But I think it will happen if TJ can defend his title. Because it's a big fight. If TJ loses this title, he's still in the top 3 at bantamweight. So it's still a big fight if he drops down to 125 to challenge Demetrius Johnson. But the only way it's a super fight is if champion versus champion. That's the only super fight there. It's the only case you can make for a super fight. So I think that actually covers that for what's in the headlines and what are current events. Now I'm going to go to some questions from my boy Dennis. Dennis, thank you for sending me these. So, first question. Which hype trains do you think will maintain momentum and which will get derailed? You use an example, Darren Till. We talked later, you actually use Khabib as an example, and how dare you use Khabib as an example for a hype train? Look, I would say out of everyone, Darren Till probably has the highest risk to lose his hype, I guess. Fighting Wonderboy Thompson, a puzzle that really no one has been able to figure out other than Woodley. And I wouldn't even say Woodley kind of figured it out rather than taking him down and staying patient and hitting him with big shots, because in both fights, that's why, in my mind, Wonderboy didn't win those fights, because Woodley hit him with those big shots. So I wouldn't say that, he definitely didn't get lucky hitting Wonderboy with those shots, but I definitely wouldn't say that he really cracked, put together that puzzle of Wonderboy. So I think that Till's probably at the biggest risk of getting his hype train derailed. Khabib definitely not in that conversation. That man's 25-0. And again, how dare you for even bringing his name in the conversation. Who will have the belt at the end of the year in each weight division? Good question. Let me pull up each weight division right now. So I will start off with the UFC women's strawweight. So right now you've got the champion, Rose Namajunas. She is fighting Joanna Jędrzejczyk. UFC 223 in the co-main event. The last fight, as we all know, Rose kind of shocked the world to be, I thought she shocked the world. Some people didn't think so, but, the tear that Joanna was on, she was 14-0, trying to break the title defense record for women, Ronda Rousey's record. I think Joanna gets it done against Rose, and then I think before the end of the year, Jessica Andrade fights for the title because she has looked outstanding. But I think Joanna gets it done again against Andrade. I do think Andrade will be a champion someday, because she is just a fucking tank. Now on to bantamweight. Looking at these Amanda Nunes fights Raquel Pennington in a few months, I think Amanda Nunes gets it done. It's crazy that right now Holly Holm, and I love Holly, but the fact that she's still number one on what she's done lately is it's a little frustrating, but that's besides the point. I would say Amanda Nunes is still the champion at the end of the year here. Women's featherweight, Cyborg, that's easy. Don't even need to get into that. Go to flyweight. Oh, that's easy. Demetrius Johnson. Nothing further. Bantamweight. So, like I said earlier, you've got TJ as the champ, Cody Garbrandt, number 1, Dominic Cruz, number 2, Assunção, number 3, Jimmy Rivera, number 4, and Marlon Moraes, number 5. After that, it kind of gets muddy with the John Linekers, John Dodsons, Aljamain Sterling, all those guys are studs. But I will say, I'll say TJ. I think TJ can probably get it done against Cody again. And I think that if that TJ Cruz fight were to happen again, I think TJ's a bit more mature and can stay a lot more patient than he did. In those earlier rounds, he was, just fishing, for that big shot. And I think that, weighed on him when it came to that decision. So if that fight happens again, I think I take TJ for both those fights. Featherweight. This is where it gets interesting. Max Holloway, Brian Ortega. Holloway's a champ. Ortega is the number one after beating Frankie Edgar. I think Max Holloway gets it done against Ortega. I think Frankie beats Cub. Then I think number 5, Stevens, beats Aldo, which drops Aldo, which leaves that opening for Frankie versus Max, maybe at the end of the year. And you know what? I think Max probably gets it done against Frankie. So I'm going to say Max Holloway. I think he stays a champ. Lightweight, Connor's a champ. Tony is the interim champ. Khabib is fighting Tony. UFC 223. Everyone else, some beasts. You've got Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Edson Barboza, Kevin Lee. I will say, I think Khabib. Probably Khabib. I actually like Connor's chances against Khabib, but I don't know if he comes back. Depends on that fight. But I do like Connor's chances. Welterweight, like I said earlier, we've been covering this a lot. Woodley, Thompson, Dos Anjos, Covington, Robbie Lawler, Damian Maia, then Till at 7. I'm going to say Woodley. I think Woodley beats Dos Anjos and Colby Covington. I think Dos Anjos is probably the hardest matchup for Woodley right now. But as far as the other guys, I think Woodley is the most well-rounded guy in that division for sure. Middleweight, UFC 225, you've got Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero in Chicago. I think Yoel Romero actually stays a lot more patient than we saw him in his first fight against Whittaker. I think he's going to avoid the wrestling, stay away from the wrestling a little bit in those earlier rounds so he doesn't use all that energy. And you know what? If I had to make, I'm assuming as the champ, Whittaker's a favorite, already beating Romero. If I had to make an underdog pick on, any of the next, 4 or 5 cards, I'm going to take Yoel Romero as the champ at 185 by the end of 2018. Light heavyweight. So DC just went up to heavyweight. Obviously still holds that 205-pound strap. I don't know what DC does after this. He's already said that when he turns 40, that's the end of his fighting career. Looking at the rest of the division, you've got Gustafsson, Ozdemir, Teixeira, Latifi, some studs there. I don't know what DC does. This is a really hard one to call. If DC does come back to 205, I'll take DC. If he does not, I will take Alexander Gustafsson by a mile, Alex. And heavyweight, Stipe is the champ. Francis is still ranked number 1. Volkov is ranked number 3, and Curtis Blades ranked number 4. I think those are the two guys to really keep your eyes on. Curtis Blades has a fight against Overeem. I think UFC 225 in Chicago as well. Look, I think Blades probably gets that done by decision. Volkov's now ranked number 3. I believe he was number 7 until he beat Fabricio. But I'm going to say DC gets it done against Stipe. And, maybe if he doesn't defend that title, then he can at least ride it out as the champion. All right. So that's 2 questions down. Do you think DC and Jones will ever happen again? Yes. If DC chooses not to ride it out, he wants that Jones fight more than anything. I think John Jones, maybe he definitely comes back sooner rather than later, and I think he makes a comeback. If DC wins that fight, he makes a comeback at heavyweight, and I don't think it's in the cards for DC to win that fight. And I love DC's probably my favorite fighter, but being realistic, I don't think it's in the cards for him to get it done. And then the Nick Newell, is he going to get the UFC contract? Shit, this is probably the hardest one. This is a tough spot for the UFC. Everyone thinks that, Dana White's just being a dick. He's not being a dick. He has a brand to protect. And if Nick Newell comes in and he beats, an absolute no one, and look, Nick Newell's a savage. His only loss comes from Justin Gaethje, which is no shame in that. One of the most violent guys in the sport, so no shame in that. But from the UFC standpoint, if Nick Newell comes in there against an absolute nobody and gets worked, for those of you that don't know, Nick Newell has, one arm, but, he's a beast, 14-1, I believe, yeah. And, but if he goes in there and, can't get it done and gets outclassed, the UFC looks like shit. So that's something that the UFC is really going to have to evaluate. I would like to see it. I'd like to see the guy get his chance, get a shot, but the UFC has a lot to do with that because of their brand. I think that wraps this first Concussion Discussion Podcast up, ladies and gentlemen. So by the time you hear this, the Instagram page should be up, should have a logo of some sort. Concussion Discussion Podcast is the handle. We will be airing this on iTunes and YouTube, so wherever you're listening to this on, you have options. And then for any questions, concerns, tell me I'm wrong, concussiondiscussionpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to do this, and I cannot wait for the next one. Cheers, guys.